For those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Derek Marsh. I'm the Associate Director of the Global Center for Women and Justice. I am, in other words, Sandy's minion. And she's asked me to facilitate this conversation, which is actually super easy for me to do today, because I'm dealing with two, your honors, if you will, judges from the presiding judge of the Juvenile Court, whose name is Craig Arthur, and we also have the presiding judge of Grace Court, who is Lindsay Martinez, that almost had her one-year paper anniversary, it turns out. I don't think you can come on stage or you can hang out in the corner. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're judges, right? So I got my respect here. But we're going to start with, come on down, give them a hand. They deserve it. We're going to be talking about how youth in the courts works here in Orange County and how it should ideally work if we had a perfect world. But we're going to start first with Craig, Judge Craig, Your Honor Craig. And I'm going to sit down and shut up before I put my foot in my mouth any further. Thank you. So here we go. Judge?
All right, good morning. That was weak. I thought they would have had primed you, right? Right? It is so great to be here. Thank you, Catherine. That was phenomenal. Tough act to follow. But thank you for having the courage to share your life experiences with us as a global community and as a community that works in the space. We learn so much from people like you. You're changing lives daily, and that was really great. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for putting this whole thing together, and you and your team and all the great work you are doing for this population. It is so great to be here. So a couple things before I launch into Juvenile Court 101, I like to call it, which may bore some of you. One, I think this is probably the best spot to be in as a speaker because you haven't eaten lunch, so you're not falling asleep. And it's probably not the best spot to be in as a speaker because I'm standing in between you and lunch. And Judge Martinez is standing in between you and lunch. So I just came back from a conference, the California Collaborative Courts Conference up in Monterey. So I know when you're looking at your phones and turning to your neighbors at 11:45, you're saying, are they done yet? And I know that when you're looking at your phones and turning to your neighbors at 12:05, you're saying they were supposed to be done at 12, weren't they? So bear with us. Hopefully we will keep you somewhat entertained. If it starts to look like I'm losing you as an audience, then I'm going to turn to Judge Martinez and just ask her to do a little karaoke, and she won't have any problem doing that. And then the next thing I want to tell you about is just a little bit of a confession on my part. So when I came to I've been on the bench 17 years. I know it doesn't look like that. It started when I was 25. And when I worked in juvenile court as an attorney for many, many years. And when I came back to juvenile court as a judge, which was 2014, Judge Maria Hernandez was our presiding judge in juvenile court. You'll hear from her tomorrow. You probably all have heard her name before. She's the one that started our Grace Court and presided over our Grace Court. When she left and went over to our Central Justice Center, she's now our presiding judge of our entire Orange County Superior Court. When she left, Justice Motowique, then Judge Motowique, Joanne Motowique, she was here earlier, but she said, "You're speaking, I'm leaving." And she then presided over Grace Court. So when I was over handling juvenile justice or child welfare cases, depending on my calendar, if I saw anything that remotely gave me a red flag that maybe it was a CSEC youth, I would refer the case and the file over to the Grace Court. So I say all that because I didn't really take the time to educate myself because I knew I had my resident experts and good friends of mine, Judge Hernandez and now Justice Motowique. She's now Justice because she was elevated to the appellate court last year. So she is no longer Judge Motowique, she's now Justice Motowique, so there's the difference. But I didn't really educate myself on CSEC issues. I knew a lot about it, and I would go to big conferences where there'd be maybe breakout sessions on it, and certainly I would try to attend those. But as you all know, Judge Hernandez, she is the expert and has been asked to speak throughout the country and even in the world. She's been asked to speak in other countries as well on CSEC issues. So when I became the presiding judge last year around this time, and they told me I was going to co-chair the CSEC steering committee, I'm like, I'm what? But of course I was saying that every other day. I have to what? When they kept telling me you have to do this and you have to do that. So I tell you all that because I feel like standing up here at the Ensure Justice Conference, I should be like an expert in human trafficking and CSEC victims, and I'm not. And so I also want to say that because I got a little intimidated by all those questions, and so I want you all to go easy on me when it comes time for questioning. All right, so let's see if this thing works. Where do I point it? Oh, there we go. All right, so I'm going to give you kind of a global overview of juvenile court, and then Judge Martinez is going to kind of land the plane and talk to you more specifically about one of our collaborative courts called our Grace Court. We have lots of acronyms in juvenile court, so if we ever throw out an acronym that you don't know what it means, just raise your hand and we'll stop. GRACE stands for Generating Resources to Abolish Child Exploitation. That was started by Judge Hernandez. So she's going to, and I use the metaphor land the plane because I told you earlier I was in Monterey earlier this week. And so when we landed in Orange County Wednesday afternoon, it was after you all had hail and snow and all this other stuff going on. Well, it was a very rough landing, so I'm hoping our landing today is not like that landing that we had on Wednesday. So let me talk to you a little bit about juvenile court. We are one courthouse up by the old block. What do they call it now? Outlets at Orange or something. By Orangewood, by UCI Medical Center, by Theo Lacey Jail, by the Juvenile Hall, all up in that area off of the City Drive. We have one juvenile courthouse serving the entire population of Orange County. So if you're a juvenile and you get picked up for a crime or have a case in juvenile court and you live in San Clemente, you're driving to the City Drive for that courthouse. So in juvenile court, we have 9 different courtrooms. There are 2 sides to juvenile court, or 2 different types of cases in juvenile court. Whoops, I must have been hitting things while I was talking. How do I go back? Ooh. Now I went back too far. Am I doing it or are you doing it? I'm doing it? Such power, I love it. Let me talk to you about child welfare cases. Child welfare cases are those cases where children are removed from their parents by a social worker or a police officer for abuse, abandonment, neglect. Those are also called dependency cases, sometimes called 300 cases because that's the Welfare and Institutions Code section that governs those cases. And anytime SSA, Social Services Agency, is involved with a case, the filing is going to be in that type of a courtroom. So we have 6 of those courtrooms, child welfare cases. Then on the other side of juvenile court, and it's literally not like sides and sides, it's actually floors, 3rd floor and 4th floor. On the other side of juvenile court, we have our juvenile justice cases, also known as delinquency cases, also known as 602 cases after the Welfare and Institutions Code. On the juvenile justice side, those cases are where youth are accused of committing crimes. So they're very similar to an adult criminal cases, but there are differences. And let me kind of go into the differences that we have in juvenile justice, because that's kind of our topic here, between adult courts. In the juvenile justice world, there's been a lot of reform over the years. We've really trying to rehabilitate the youth. We're trying to allow the youth a chance at becoming a successful citizen. So we work with them on school issues. We work with them on, when they get older, transitioning them. You'll hear the word or the acronym TAY population, transitional age youth. So we really are not punitive. We don't call them a defendant. We don't even talk about them being convicted. We have a petition that's filed, and if it's found true by the court, it's a sustained petition. So we try to pull away from a lot of criminal terms that you would hear on TV or if you entered into an adult court. And we talk about youth. We have gotten away from the term minors. Judge Hachamanji is currently one of our delinquency or our juvenile justice judges up in juvenile court. And so we really try to work with the youth to get them to be in a position where they can come out of the system and be productive in the community. So those are the 2 different types of cases that we handle. We also will see some youth who may come in on the social services side, child welfare side, who then pick up a crime or a petition and then have a 602 filing as well. We call those our crossover youth. And our crossover youth can have cases on both sides of the juvenile court. Back in about a year ago, we just started a crossover youth court, which I preside over on Wednesdays, that handles those. And I'll talk in a moment a little bit about our collaborative courts that we have in juvenile court. Try that. Let's see if that works. Okay, so these are just some figures. Dr. Morgan loves numbers, so these are numbers. Just in terms of arrests and referrals, and you can see in that middle section, it alarmed me that we had so many referrals and then such a low number of formal wardship and informal dispositions. That's because a lot of cases are deferred out or dismissed or dismissed or not handled formally. These numbers, if you look at the Conditions of Children report for this year, the 28th annual, I think it is, these numbers have substantially decreased over the years because of juvenile justice reform and the idea that we should be trying to help these youth out in the community without bringing them into custodial facilities like Juvenile Hall, our Youth Guidance Center, and our Youth Leadership Academy, which are custodial facilities. So in terms of juvenile justice, I didn't know it had that little white part. Okay. These are the statutory goals that we like to strive for in terms of our juvenile justice cases. We certainly want to hold them accountable for their behavior, but we also want to make our findings and orders and handle the cases keeping in mind the youth's best interests. Again, I talked about punitive versus rehabilitative efforts. And we also have to always keep in mind the safety of the community. So we're constantly juggling safety of the community versus what's in the youth's best interest. And finding a way home when they come into the juvenile court and there's a petition filed and we have a detention hearing. We don't always want to keep them in custody unless that is what we're forced to do because of the facts of the case. We want to get them to a place of stability, a place of safety, that being hopefully their home. I want to touch upon, if I can get the thing to cooperate. I don't even know where I'm supposed to be pointing, so you're doing it. Oh, can you just do next slide? How about we do that? These are some of the outcomes for system-involved youth. And this is the system-involved youth means either on the SSA side, the child welfare side, or juvenile justice side. So if you can see, 4 times more likely not to graduate from high school. Think about, for a moment, I always like to bring in practical instances to relate some of the facts and figures. Think about when a judge, me, gets a request from a social worker to authorize funds to buy a yearbook for a student, a senior in a high school, because that's the first school the student has ever gone to for the entire year. I mean, those of you who are parents, or those of you who, grew up in not the foster care system, that is staggering sometimes to digest. So we deal with a lot of education issues. Kudos to all of our friends at OCDE. We work very closely with OCDE. This talks about a lot of the educational issues, the stats that you're seeing there. The next slide is what Catherine was talking about, the marginalized populations. These are our black and brown communities. I know it's a tough slide to read, but it just suffice it to say they have a tougher time. They're overrepresented in the juvenile justice arena. And then I want to talk to you about a marginalized community. Somebody asked about it. Catherine gave examples of marginalized communities. But this is what I'm going to focus for the next few slides on our LGBTQ population. And if you think about growing up and having a sexual identity issue or a gender identity issue, this is their reality. And it's a reality that sometimes is very difficult to understand and very difficult to believe. If we can go to the next slide. This was a survey here in the state of California. Have you ever been removed from your home because someone was hurting you? And the acronyms here, GCC is gender conforming and cisgender, LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, questioning, and then gender non-conforming, transgender. So you could see the difference. 35% in that lower class say they have been removed from their home because someone was hurting them. And then if we go to the next slide, have you ever been placed in a group home because someone was hurting you? Again, You'll see it in a moment. Next slide. The numbers much higher for the LGBTQ group. And then if you go to the next slide, have you ever been detained for running away? Again, we see higher numbers for this marginalized community. And the next slide, to me, is very staggering. Have you ever been homeless after being kicked out or running away? If you think about it, some of these youth are not accepted in their families. They're going to be kicked out of their home with no place to go. And they are the ones who are finding or trying to find a way home. 44% of them become homeless. And if we move to the next slide, Catherine talked to us about community and being able to have that community that listens and that takes action. Because just because we have a safe home to go to or a nice home to go to, I don't want to always use the word safe, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be safe. Or it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be structure, stability, safety, all of the things we think about when we think about home. These are all of our partners that we work with in the juvenile court. And let me talk to you a little bit about our collaborative courts, then I'm going to turn it over to Judge Martinez. We have 5 collaborative specialty courts in juvenile court. The first is our grace court, which she's going to talk about. Next is our teen court, which I preside over on Fridays today. They're having it right now, and I'm going to race up there this afternoon to handle some very difficult and complicated cases in our teen court. We're dealing with a very vulnerable population. If they're CSEX related, they're probably going to be in Judge Martinez's court and not in my teen court. Our third is our crossover youth court that I talked to you about earlier, and that's on Wednesdays afternoons. I preside over that. And then our fourth is our juvenile recovery court. That is strictly in our juvenile justice side of the juvenile court and deals with youth who are battling substance use disorders. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide while I'm telling them about the last collaborative court, which is our youth development court. That's a collaborative court in our juvenile justice courts, dealing with persons who have had long-term sentences, who are older, who have committed some serious crimes, trying to transition them into adulthood. And before I turn it over to Judge Martinez, I just want to say, being at, again, I keep going back to Catherine because she had so many great points, but talking about never stop the education, it never stops. I've been on the bench 17 years. I'm going to conference after conference after conference. I just went to the Monterey one, and we're going to one I'm going to one in April. I think Judge Martinez and I are going to one dealing with CSEC victims in November. Never, ever stop the education. But I also want to say that we are doing a lot of great things, and there's still more that we need to do. I know Justice Motoike, for those of you who were here last year, talked to you all about how difficult it is sometimes to place these youth, to find them a home, and find them a place of safety and security where they feel safe. Because just because it's a structure that has maybe a fireplace and a warm bed doesn't mean it feels safe for them. And so finding placements is one of our biggest challenges. And then to put on another layer of finding placements that provide therapeutic services that really understand and are trauma-informed and that can reach this population, another layer of complexity. Then finding placements or services that can deal with substance use issues and how we handle those. And then finding a way to we have to, if anybody's listening out there, we have to find a way, Dr. Bernie, where's Dr. Bernie? We have to find a way for continuity of treatment. If you're traumatized and you come into a system, you do not want to have to keep telling your story over and over and over again because this therapist left on maternity leave or that therapist just left for another job or that therapist isn't going to follow you because you've now changed placements. We've got to come up, we're better than this, we've got to come up with a way to solve that problem. And now I just lost my train of thought because I got so excited about that. But I know, is that bad? See, I really am old. You thought I was young. I was fooling you. But we do have great people working in the space. They're trauma-informed. Keep getting the trauma-informed education. Keep getting the education on the development of the youth brain that is so predominant out there. Keep educating yourself so that we can better serve this population. And now I'm going to stop talking because you're all probably bored of me and you're like, is he done yet? And I'm going to turn it over to Judge Martinez. Lindsay Martinez came to us in April, May. When's your 1-year anniversary? May. Oh, thank you. So she's a baby judge, and we put her in grace court. I know. She comes to us from she used to work in Big Law many years ago. She then worked at the Court of Appeal as a research attorney for our presiding justice, Justice O'Leary. And so she saw a lot of our juvenile court cases go up on appeal and did a lot of the in-depth research on them. She is the mother of 4 little small children, and she's been doing an excellent job over in our dependency courts. So with a warm welcome, I'll turn it over to Judge Martinez.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Judge Arthur. No one thought you were old. I don't know why you were bringing that up. Yeah, you did. You look great. You did a wonderful job. And I told him one time in confidence that I love to sing karaoke and that I may or may not have sung Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 at one of my judicial trainings. And then he just blabs it to the group, but that's okay. So I'm Lindsay Martinez. I preside over our Grace Court. So in Grace Court, we handle some of the most challenging, emotionally fraught, sometimes to be candid, discouraging, and just really sad cases. I always like to say we have some of the really high highs and really low lows. There's really no kind of baseline day in Grace Court. It's always like a buckle up. So it's always something really wonderful and positive, and then I call the next case, and it's the opposite. It's a real roller coaster most days. And we do hold Grace Court every week on Tuesdays. It's a full day calendar where we do handle what Judge Arthur was talking about, children who are on both sides of the juvenile court. So we'll have children who only are in dependency, so those are cases where social services have been involved. And then we'll have children who are juvenile justice cases. The common thread is that they are all either CSEC victims, survivors, or at risk. And then sometimes we have the dual jurisdiction children who are parts of both systems. So it's a big team that comes together to help everyone. So you've heard Grace is generating resources to abolish child exploitation. So Their CSEC involved youth. We understand that CSEC is a form of child abuse, but that was not always the case. What happened to prompt some of the changes in the law was that previously children were, and we can go to the next slide, children were being arrested and charged as prostitutes, okay? So children who could not legally consent to sex were being brought into the criminal justice system and facing serious charges as children. And so there were some pushes and changes in the law. We can go to the next slide, where there was a comprehensive federal law to address trafficking of persons, and that was in 2000. And California, as it often does, started leading the way with Prop 35 that was passed in 2012. And basically the thought behind these laws, right, is that children are victims, and we can go to the next slide. They're not prostitutes. They can't be. A child is not developmentally, legally, or socially able to make a choice to become involved in a commercial sex industry. So children are victims. And after the passage of Prop 35, there's no longer a requirement to prove force, fraud, coercion in sex trafficking cases involving children. There wasn't an explicit requirement for exchange of money. And we can go to the next slide. So California continued to pass additional legislation supporting victims of human trafficking. So we have some more sections in the Welfare and Institutions Code. We can allowing for certain petitions to be filed in the juvenile court when a child is a victim of human trafficking, requiring establishment of a CSEC program within the counties, the creation of CSEC memorandums of understanding, some interagency protocols. So, for example, we'll have children who are with social services agency, and they could also have a case with probation, some sort of interagency collaboration and communication and protocols about handling these children. 2014, Orange County also had a CSEC steering committee, which Judge Arthur helps chair, and the Orange County Blue Ribbon Commission, which did sunset in July of 2021. So all of this new law, all of these new interagency protocols, more attention being brought to the issue that children are victims in this whole scheme. And so that brings us to Grace Court, opening doors in 2015. Now, in Grace Court, we work together. We work with the youth. First, they are identified. So in order to come into Grace Court, someone in the system needs to flag the case. Sometimes it's obvious, but other times, perhaps there's an at-risk youth where the signs aren't as overt. And so all of the judges have training on spotting a potential CSEC case. Sometimes they'll call me and, run through the facts and ask. A lot of times, a social worker, an attorney, they'll flag it as potential CSEC. And that, I think we talked a little bit about this before, that what we see in the movies. I was at another training and they kept talking about the movie Taken. So it's always like a creepy white van pulls up, and then there's like cages, and people are trapped, and it's very dramatic, right? And it's, at least in my experience, it has never been like that. And so oftentimes it's, so if those facts were presented to me, it'd be very easy, right? That'd be very easy to spot. But oftentimes it's a lot more difficult than you might think. So sometimes you can't, a lot of times the youth who are involved don't identify as a victim. They don't identify a problem. They think the trafficker is a loving boyfriend. They think the trafficker's their partner, a friend, their relative. And often because of the trauma that they've endured as a child, they can present as antisocial, distrustful of authority, push away the people who are there to provide support. And so there are these special trainings, we're here trying to give some tips, but other trainings to spot the youth who are especially vulnerable. Like we heard, those vulnerabilities are real. Looking for children who are running away, who are skipping school, all of these kind of red flags that are popping up. So we can go to the next slide. And so once a child is accepted into Grace Court, they work with this large team. And when I first started, I was really intimidated because I had just barely gotten the hang of knowing like who my clerk was, who my bailiff was, who was the court reporter. Okay, now I know, okay, that's the public defender, that's the county council, that's minors council. Okay, they represent the parents. Okay, I kind of had the lay of the land in my dependency court. And then I got into Grace Court, and there's like 25 people. And a lot of them shared the same name. There's like an inordinate number of Lisas that are part of this team. So they'd be like, well, Lisa and Lisa and Lisa. I'm like, is everyone named Lisa? What's happening here? And the answer was yes. But anyway, I thought it was just a trick to confuse the new judge. But we do have a large team, and you can kind of see that on the slide. So there's just cross-system stakeholders who are part of the Grace Court and work in general in the collaborative courts. We have this collaborative, multidisciplinary team. So we've got the court, we've got the different agencies, we've got probation, healthcare agency, we've got SSA, we have all the different attorneys. So we'll have the district attorney, public defender, county counsel, minors counsel, parents attorneys. We have our community providers. We have CASA, who are court appointed special advocates. We might have local or federal law enforcement. We have our education liaison. We work closely, who helps connect us and work closely with all our different schools and school districts. And so we have this big, big team. And I forgot to call it out at the beginning. We do have a very special member of our team who usually steals the show, and that's our therapy dog, Cadence, who is a adorable, oh, there we go, look at that. There's Cadence. She is a golden retriever who, on one of my first days of Grace Court, came to me as apparently the most traumatized person in the room, in a room full of different survivors and stakeholders, came like around the bench and over to me and would not leave my side. And I kept trying to say like bad dog under my breath. She was calling me out because apparently sensed that I was a little nervous and traumatized my first Grace Court experience. But yes, Cadence, and it's remarkable. We'll have some children who, they don't want to talk to me. Okay, these are teenagers. Sometimes they'll hear a swear word under their breath. They won't look at me. They'll like put their hoodie up and they'll like turn to the side, and they just could not care less like that I'm a judge, that we're in court. Like it's humbling. It's great. I think that's a good experience. But Cadence comes in and they start petting Cadence, and all of a sudden they're talking. They're still not looking at me, but that's okay. They're like petting, and it's amazing. It's like magic, a lot of times where this, kind of focus on the dog, and it's just there, and you can talk if you want, and if you don't want, just pet the dog. It's okay, and it's wonderful. So she is an invaluable member of our team. But we provide this holistic approach, right? So we want to deal with these traumatized children, want to provide educational, mental health support, basic needs, and that's all in addition and layered onto the quote-unquote typical courtroom information that they need, okay? So we work towards harm reduction. We try to approach each case individually and understand that what success looks like for one person can be very different from what quote-unquote success looks like from someone else. We always try to focus on the positive, so we do hear a lot of negative things. So I always try, and the team does a really great job of trying to pull some positive, kind of like a compliment sandwich, right? So like a positive, a negative, a positive, I don't know, working on it. And then, we face a lot of challenges. Like you've heard, these youth, they run away from placement. They don't know how to find home. Even with a big support group, it's very hard sometimes to reach these children. But we keep trying. We show up every week. Despite the very difficult nature of the work, it's a very fun, you wouldn't think it'd always be fun, but a very fun group, a very passionate group. Everybody works so hard, spends countless hours on these cases, and I really do appreciate all of the really hard work that the team does in Grace Court. So I think that's probably enough from us, and maybe time for some questions. All right. Do we need another one? Go for it.
Judge Martinez is still Judge Arthur. He's handling all the questions, so just in case you're curious who the focus will be today. We have one question already. I want to thank, but first of all, let me do this. Let me thank both judges for taking the time today to come visit with us and share their perspectives on juvenile court and Grace Court. I can tell you that having experience on the police side of things, watching kids, go through the system over and over again and not find anywhere to land because they don't have the necessary support, not just from social services, which we have a great team out here in Orange County, I'm not minimizing that, but also not having, at the time I was involved, not having a Grace Court and not appreciating the nuances of that victimization. 10 times better, 100 times better than it ever was when I was doing it. I just want to give kudos to these folks for continuing the Grace Court mentality and appreciating the juvenile aspects of criminality versus just treating everyone like an adult and throwing them away and locking the key and forgetting about who they are as people. So with that in mind, we have Jill Dominguez, I'm outing you, Jill Dominguez, who asked if each of you would please address your philosophy about pregnant or parenting youth in foster care, and especially if they're victims of CSEC, and how we handle that here in Orange County.
Before Judge Martinez answers that question, you'll all be happy to know that when I lost my train of thought, I remember what I was going to say. And that is, and Judge Martinez touched upon it, when they get to us, the youth get into our courtroom, some of them are on probation and some of them may be testing positive, running away, doing all kinds of different behavior that they're being talked to by their probation officer or their social worker or their CASA advocate. So when they get to us, we don't really want to harp on all that negative. We really want to, like she said, drag out some positive, find some positive, hold them accountable, but keep moving forward. That's a kind of a parenting lecture that I take into the courtroom where, you made a misstep. Let's look forward and keep moving forward and overcome this and learn from it. Now, over to the question, and we do have pregnant teen in our courts. I have them in my teen court. You have them in your grace court. I'll answer in a global sense. We're very supportive of them. Our community-based organizations, Waymakers, Orangewood, help provide them things to get ready for the baby. And so it's a very supportive thing. They'll bring the baby into court. We get off the bench, go hold the baby, and just really be there to be a constant sense of support. And I know it's going to sound odd, but lack of judgment, even though we're judges, but we do not want to be judging these youth. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think there was another piece to it.
Yeah, we see a lot of pregnant youth in Grace Court. I think right now we have kind of a high number. We have a couple who are about to give birth any moment, I think. We've had baby showers in court where community partners bring gifts and bring strollers or whatever the mom is going to need. I've oohed and awed over many ultrasound photo brought to me in court. We just try to be, like Judge Arthur said, kind of non-judgmental, provide support, whatever they need. There's some special placements for children who are going to be mothers or who are parenting young children, and so we look at some of those options and explore those. But just trying to make sure that they're healthy, make sure that they're receiving the care that they need and that they're ready. There's some parenting classes we'll help support them with, and just connect them to other resources, organizations, and just to be there for them every step of the way.
Thank you, Judge. Also, our next question then would be, I'm sure with a bunch of people in the room, frequently we get, I will speak for myself, I won't accuse you of it, there's sometimes miscommunications. People have done different things or said different things, or why are you laughing? And I guess the question is basically, how do you address those miscommunications? Do you have anything in place that helps you circumnavigate them or approach them directly, and so that the case impact is minimized for the youth that's being presided over, judged, whatever?
Well, for me, it's like I have 4 adult children. I tell them frequently, read your environment, know your environment. I think, and of course I have a lot of people out here that appear in my courtroom, but I think I do a good job of that, and we can read signs and cues from not only the youth, but maybe their attorney or their social worker. We're very delicate in things that we bring up, maybe when the parent gets into the courtroom or gets on video. So we have a lot of... we're attuned a lot to sensitivities to kind of minimize the impact. There are certain things. What we do in our courts is we staff the case before the youth comes into the courtroom. So during that staffing, it's all of the team and the judge. And so all of these sensitivity issues can be brought up in that team. We have Dr. Bernie, who is on with our court evaluation and guidance unit. She's on for both Grace and Teen, right? You're on with Grace as well. And she will stop us and cue in, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't talk about that because that might have this impact or direct, effect on the youth. So the team is very, very good. And it goes right down to, what is a youth's pronouns when they come into the courtroom? How are we going to address the youth? And we learn that by being a team and having all of the partners work together.
Yeah, and I'll say, we all make faux pas or say things or don't realize, what they said. I won't repeat it, but I said something in court by mistake. I didn't understand a more updated meaning. And I was quickly clued in by my clerk, by some admin people, and like 3 or 4 people were like, Judge, that doesn't mean what you think it means. I was like, okay, yeah, now I know. But I think it's, we're human, right? All of us are just trying our best. I think the best way to address a miscommunication is say, you know what? I'm sorry, I think I've been calling you your wrong pronouns. I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced your name when I first said, I'm sorry, could you just tell me? So sometimes, you get going, you're like, okay, let's back up. And I didn't understand that, or I didn't mean that, or I might have said something wrong. Just let me know, And I think it's good and a testament to our team that so many people felt really comfortable telling me that I totally messed that up. So it was a good thing.
It is a good thing. It is a good thing. And you all have to realize that we are humans and we make mistakes. Years ago in my teen court, I was complimenting a youth on his new tattoo on his arm that was the angels, the big A of the angels, because I grew up, being an Angels fan. I'm like, oh my God, that's such a cool tattoo. Boy, as soon as he left, I had the entire team saying, Judge, that's like a gang tattoo. And so we're human. We're constantly learning.
Thank you. And kind of derivative of that last question is, how do you suggest we best accommodate and communicate with our LGBTQ youth out there?
Well, I would say for me, it's like, how do I say this? We don't want to accentuate it. I mean, nobody runs into the room telling us, hey, I'm straight, and, treat me like I'm straight with my normal pronouns. I mean, we don't do that. So we don't expect our youth to be advertising their sexual orientation or what identity, gender identity, but we do want to make sure we're not making mistakes. I just went to a session at the conference I was at on gender-affirming care. So we're constantly learning, and this area is constantly evolving. I happen to be part of the community, and those letters, LGBTQ and everything else, I can't keep up with it. I learn terms at each of these conferences that I go to. I have to look up terms and educate myself. And we learn from the youth. We have such a good and open dialogue with these youth that we're able to have these open discussions. I have open discussions in my courtroom. Mind you, they're confidential proceedings. There is just our team there. But I have open discussions with a youth about his surgery that he was having to become a trans youth. So I think because of the environment that we try to create, and again, I turn to my people that are here that are on our team, that we hopefully are succeeding in that, and we make it a comfortable environment and a safe space.
Yeah, I mean, I approach every case, like Judge Arthur said, I have 4 little kids, and I mean, these kids to me, it's like as if I have 4 kids at home and 500 kids at work, okay? So when I talk to a child who's a victim of abuse, who has been involved in CSEC activity, who happens to be gay, who happens to be transgender, I just talk to them like a human being. I don't think there's any magic words you have to say, as long as you're open, empathetic, non-judgmental, and just willing to listen to what they have to tell you. It's just a human connection. There's no special words you have to say to someone who's been victimized in a certain way. There's no special words you have to say to someone, who identifies with a certain gender. It's just being open and listening to what they're telling you.
Thank you. Final question, because we're running low. I appreciate all the questions you put here. We will try our best to give responses to you at a later time today. But really quick, it's a softball question. Is Grace Court unique to Orange County, or are there Grace courses throughout California or throughout the United States? What's the scoop with that?
So I'd love to say we were, very special. We are very special. But no, not unique in the state, not unique in the country. I know when I go to conferences, I always connect with the other judges who preside over Grace Court equivalents. So there's a court in San Diego, there's a court in LA, there's a court in Fresno, there's courts up and down the state, and of course in other states. So I think obviously we run our courts differently, at least with my other California judges. We meet at conferences and we try to share tips. And I have it in the works to go observe a session in LA and try to learn from each other. So while we're not unique, but we do kind of work and grow together.
However, the name Grace Court is unique to Orange County. There are CSEC courts all over, as Judge Martinez indicated, but Grace Court, just the name, is unique, thanks to Judge Hernandez.
Thank you. One more time, I'd like to show your appreciation for the judges to take their time out to share their information.